I have written a lot on forgiveness and unforgiveness, and the reason is because we live in relationship with other people, and sometimes those relationships go sour, and so therefore forgiveness is an essential aspect for our Christian experience in order to live well with other people. But forgiveness is a complicated subject, and so one of the things that I talk about in the forgiveness nomenclature is attitudinal forgiveness and transactional forgiveness. And so, in this daily message, I want to talk just a little bit about attitudinal forgiveness and what it is. There are some times in our relationships that you cannot transact forgiveness with the other person, and the reason is quite simple. The other person is unwilling or unable to transact forgiveness with you. In an illustration of when they're unable. It could be a person that has sinned against you or you sinned against them, but let's just say that they have sinned against you once or repeatedly over a period and they die. Well, in that instance, there is no way to transact forgiveness. You cannot ask them to forgive you. They cannot ask you to forgive them. There can be no transaction whatsoever. That is an illustration of someone who is unable to transact forgiveness because one of the people in the construct has passed away. Now, there are other situations where the person is living, but yet they are unwilling to transact forgiveness. So they are able, but they are unwilling to do so. And so now we have a fractured relationship. And so let's say that someone has sinned against you one time or repeatedly, and they never come to you and ask you to forgive them. You cannot transact forgiveness. Well, in that situation, you want to have attitudinal forgiveness, an attitude of forgiveness, a spirit of forgiveness toward them, though it does not release them from what they do. They can never be released from their sin until they ask God to forgive them, and then, of course, come to you and ask you to forgive them for what they did to you. And if they're unwilling to do those things, then that relationship will be forever fractured because there is no transaction. However, you do not want to be captivated by what they did to you. There are a lot of bitter, angry, critical, grumbling, whining people in our world today who part of why they are that way is because they harbor what has happened to them for an extended period because there's been no forgiveness. Well, if you're in a situation where you cannot transact forgiveness, that sin is ever present in your mind, in your heart, whatever they did to you. Therefore, it is essential for you to have an attitude of forgiveness toward them so that you are not captivated by what they did to you. The illustration that I use for this is with my father, who sinned against me repeatedly over a period of a couple of decades, and then he passed away. And I was a very bitter, angry person because of being victimized by him. And so this is the dual tension of the sinning victim, the person who has been sinned against, the victim, the offended party, to put it in a biblical construct. You have been offended. Someone has transgressed against you, and so that is legit. But because there's been no transactional forgiveness, there is no releasing of that sin. Therefore, attitudinal forgiveness becomes vital. If you don't learn how to forgive them in your heart attitudinally, now you can potentially become the sinning victim. I am offended, I have been transgressed against, and now I am sinning in response to what they did to me. Now, that is a very difficult person to counsel or to disciple because they hold their victimization up very high while not acknowledging the fact that they're sinning in response to what happened to them. They need to come to a place of having an attitude of forgiveness. Now, you can also flip this around and say that that I have been the one doing the sinning against the other person, and I want to transact with the other person, but they are unwilling to transact with me. Well, now they're the sinning victim. They have been victimized by your sin. You have transgressed against them, but they're unwilling to transact forgiveness with you, and so they can grow in hostility and bitterness and so forth. But you're carrying that sin. Well, in that case, you ask God to forgive you for what you have done, and then you have an attitude or a spirit of forgiveness for them because they are sinning against you by unwilling to ask for forgiveness. They are not willing to resolve this, and that is an offense that needs to be resolved, but they're unwilling to do that. And so, the best way that you must posture yourself before the Lord and say, God, you have forgiven me. That is a transaction, and I have an attitude of forgiveness toward them. And I pray that you would bring us together at some future date so that I can ask in a transactional way. And so there's a couple illustrations of attitudinal forgiveness. It's absolutely essential because we live in a fallen world, and when we transgress against people or when people transgress against us, uh, many times it's just not clean and neat, and we can't put a bow on it. Therefore, attitudinal forgiveness becomes critical, and we must learn how to apply it to ourselves, apply it to our lives and our relationships.